Greetings, everybody. It's so wonderful to have you. We're having participants joining us as we come. We have about 18 participants who have joined us, and as well as our panelists. So we'll get started in just a moment. Thanks so much for joining us on a Thursday morning. Thanks to our panelists for joining us from all over the country, from Delaware, from Virginia, from Washington State. It's great to have you guys here with us. So it's just we got 21 participants. My name is Dr. Bradley Wilson. I'm the director of the Center for Resilient Communities here at West Virginia University. And we are calling in from our site here in Eberly College. The Center for Resilient Communities was established 3 years ago in collaboration with the Department of Geology and Geography and Eberly College. And the focus of the center is really to advance community-based action research in support of a more just future in Appalachia. I'm joined here by Dr. Paulo Farah, who's a professor of public administration, and we're really excited about this collaboration and in support of the Energy Transition Conference. This is the first what will hopefully be multiple what will be multiple events related to the Energy Transition Conference. So I'm going to invite Dr. Farah to introduce the conference and its goals.
Thank you very much, Dr. Wilson. Thank you very much, Bradley. So I'm very grateful to the Center for Resilient Communities for hosting physically this hybrid conference, hybrid event. It's a pleasure. And also, of course, I would like to thank also the Eberly College, the Rockefeller School of Public Policy and Politics, and the Department of Public Administration that supported, and also the Senate grants that supported this event as well, these multiple events that will be held today, and then in May and June with additional sessions that will examine other perspective from the US perspective and global perspective. So the intention of this conference was indeed to cover case studies and experiences, and also academic scholarly exchanges on energy transitions. And this conference has been a joint collaboration with the center, with the department, but also with our Eberly College Interdisciplinary Research Collaborative on Global Challenges and Local Response Initiative that involve various colleagues from different departments in different units, from philosophy to history, political science, international studies, and several others, languages as well. So with this intention to try to face and try to address very complicated matters from a multidisciplinary perspectives. In addition to the internal collaboration, there is also the support from the American Society of International Law, the interest group on international environmental law, and the interest group on intellectual property law for the relevance of these topics on environment, climate, and technology. In addition to that, also, I would like to thank the support from local Global Law Initiative for Sustainable Development, which is a think tank focusing on this matter from a global perspective. Without further ado, I think that I would pass back the words to you for introducing the speakers, and I really appreciate very much each one of your time and for being here and sharing your experience with us and our participant. And this event is recorded, will be also circulated later, because for many conflict of schedule, many people cannot be there, but generally these videos are much more than viewed later as a recording. We had really an event we had in March 2021 with the Paris USG joining the Paris Agreement. We had hundreds of people that have attended these events offline on recording. So I hope we have all your permission to record you and share this with many other people. So thanks again, and I'll give you the floor.
Yeah, thanks so much. I think one of the things I'll stress is the sort of beginning and end of this is it's about a conversation that Paulo and I have been having It's a conversation that all of you are having in your homes. It's a conversation that we're having in academic circles and policy circles, and it's a conversation about the future of energy and energy use, energy development here in Appalachia and around the world. And so one of the elements and goals of our goals here is to actually facilitate a conversation rather than having a series of presentations. And so I want to thank Adrienne Anderson, Thompson Gross, and Autumn Long for joining this conversation. It's also important to recognize that these are friends. Thompson, Autumn, and Adrienne are friends of ours, and so it's excellent to get to introduce them, and I'll just do so very briefly. First, Thompson Gross. Thank you, Thompson, for being here. Thompson holds a master's degree in geography with a focus on geographic information science from WVU. He's worked for the past 2 years in the field of renewable energy. He's currently a GIS analyst and site acquisition analyst for Urban Grid, which is one of the largest solar development firms on the East Coast. Thanks so much, Thompson, for pinging in. Autumn Long. Autumn holds a master's degree in geography from WVU as well, and has worked for the past 8 years in the field of renewable energy development at the community scale in West Virginia and the greater Appalachian region. Autumn was the state director of Solar United Neighbors, and for 3 years was advancing cooperative solar development here in the state. And now she's leading Appalachian Solar Finance Fund, which is a project of Appalachian Voices. Thank you so much for being with us, Autumn. And then finally, last but not least, Adrienne Anderson, a longtime friend and from college days. Adrienne is calling in from Seattle, Washington, or Issaquah. He holds a master's in business administration from the Fletcher School of Business at Tufts University. Adrienne has worked for more than a decade in the renewable energy field in companies such as Apple and Google and Amazon, and he's currently Senior Director of Renewable Energy at Microsoft. Thanks for joining us as well, Adrienne. So to get us started, I'd like to ask Adrienne to share a little bit about how he got into the renewable energy field, a little bit of a story, maybe background, and how you ended up doing what you do now. And I'll ask Autumn next to share that, and then Thompson can share his perspective on that too.
Yeah, you bet. So actually, I've been in the energy space now for more than almost a decade. I think I'm approaching 2 decades, Brad. God, it's been a long time since we graduated college. So yeah, I kind of came to the renewable space a little bit sort of circuitously. I had a land development company in Texas back in the early 2000s, and we started producing our own biodiesel. We then did a business plan to sort of spin up a biodiesel company. We brought in some angel investors, and they kind of fleeced us. They took all of our equity and pushed us out, which actually was great because the biodiesel market fell apart. And I went to grad school and got an MBA to realize, because I realized that I needed to get a little bit more experience negotiating contracts and doing deals. I then worked for a company called UV, a German EPC firm, for a number of years, building wind, solar, geothermal, biomass here in the US, in Latin America, in India, some in Europe. And I got really lucky. I negotiated a deal with Apple back in like 2014 or so. The deal fell apart, but I got recruited by them. And then I've worked my way through Apple and then Amazon and Google and now Microsoft. And my job is to procure renewable energy for all of these companies. So I negotiate contracts, I build programs, we work on a lot of environmental justice initiatives and so forth. So that's a little bit about me. I apologize. I apparently have someone at the door. We're in the process of moving. So I'll be right back.
Thanks so much, Adrienne. Thanks for that introduction. Autumn, could you introduce a little bit about your entry point into the renewable energy field?
Hi, yeah, thanks Bradley for the invitation. I'm excited to be here. I'm Autumn Long. I am a a master's graduate student of Bradley's at the geography department at WVU over a decade ago. And I am born and raised in West Virginia, and I came into the renewable energy space through my interest in economic and environmental justice issues in Appalachia and West Virginia. So about 6 years ago, I began working with a national advocacy and solar education nonprofit called Solar United Neighbors. I served as their state director and oversaw a region of states in the Midwest and Appalachian region, really educating the public about solar energy and helping people go solar on their homes and local businesses, and doing policy advocacy for solar, the ever important policy advocacy piece of the work. And then since last summer, I've been working with a regional nonprofit organization called Appalachian Voices, managing a couple of projects for them, including the project that I'm most excited to talk about today, the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund, which is an Appalachian Regional Commission Power Initiative funded program that helps catalyze commercial and institutional scale solar projects throughout central Appalachian communities that have been impacted by the decline in the coal economy. So we're working on energy transition issues and helping to overcome regional specific barriers based on policy and economic challenges in central Appalachia to help more communities go solar on their public institutions and community organizations and local businesses. It's a little bit about me and what I do.
Thank you so much, Autumn, for that introduction. It's really excellent. Tom Thompson, can you give us a little bit of a background on how you ended up in the renewable energy field?
Yeah, sure thing. So I'm relatively new to solar and renewables in general. I've been working in the industry for about 1.5 years now. My entry point was GIS. So as Bradley mentioned, I got my master's in GIS at West Virginia University, working for the center, and before that, the Food Justice Lab. So I had a strong interest in web mapping, public data, and all of that has kind of really set me up for, the job that I'm doing now, which is helping to procure land and identify, optimal siting for utility scale solar or large scale solar farms. So I'm still, like I said, learning about solar and really looking forward to, I think, learning more today as well.
That's great. Thanks so much, Thompson. Paulo, if a decade ago, if you had asked me if my master students that I worked with would end up being doing work in the solar field, I wouldn't have believed you. But now, I think there's a number of students that I've worked with who are in the solar field, and increasingly wondering why I'm not in the solar. Why aren't we in the solar field, Paula? I don't know. So
we are actually.
We are okay. We are guilty by association. So thanks so much for those introductions, and it gives our attendees an opportunity to get to know each of you a little bit better. I'll also just say that we have 16, about 20 people online, and at any point, if folks have questions or would like to post anything in the chat, we will be checking in. So as we move forward in the conversation, we'll hopefully include your voices as well. And if you are in the chat and sharing, see if you can just quickly introduce yourself with your question. So I'm calling in from here, I do this work, and this is my question. So, so the first question that we have, Autumn mentioned this in her introduction. We're here in West Virginia. We're in a place that has historically been, we are an energy state. We have for a long time been a site for energy development, principally around coal and more recently around natural gas development. And so renewable energy it diverges, is an alternative to some of these forms of energy development. And it would be really interesting to hear from your vantage point, the that one of the questions we want to explore in the concept of an energy transition is how we think about energy transitions, perhaps not only in terms of the energy itself, but its social and environmental embeddedness in our communities. And so renewable energy too is an area of development that we want to think about in terms of social justice and environmental justice. And so I wanted to ask Autumn if she could maybe begin by sharing some perspectives, given her work specifically in West Virginia, around the dimensions of social justice and environmental justice, or social and environmental justice. Like how does renewable energy address these questions of social and environmental justice? Or how might we need to think a little bit about these themes as we're advancing in our field of advancing renewable energy?
Well, I will do my best to take a crack at that, and I hope other panelists will jump in with their thoughts as well. It's a really important question and a big question, and I think it's particularly worth reflecting on in Appalachia and in West Virginia, where some of us are located. West Virginia has been an energy leader and an energy exporter, and has really played a major role in building our nation's electricity system and building our energy system and powering our country for the past century. And as we move into the 21st century and an energy system that is really more and more focused on and centered around renewable energy resources, West Virginia has an opportunity to maintain a role as an energy leader and to benefit from the positive changes that renewable energy can bring to our energy system. But we need to take advantage of that opportunity and ask for the resources that we deserve as a state and as a region. So that's a really important message for me in my work, that West Virginia deserves to be compensated for the ways it's sacrificed both our people and our natural environment in this state and the region have borne a lot of burdens of our energy system. And so I think it's fair to ask for resources and compensation in order to make sure that we're not left behind in the 21st century energy transition. So there's very much an environmental and social justice aspect to solar energy. My work has been focused on distributed solar energy, rooftop solar in local communities, on homes and local businesses. And that type of energy production is an exciting change and a really fundamental and deep shift in the way our energy is produced and consumed in this country. We're moving from a very centralized energy production system in which large-scale fossil fuel-powered centralized power generators produce energy for population centers that are, oftentimes at a long geographical distance from where that energy is produced. And now, with the advent of rooftop solar, and especially as solar plus storage becomes more affordable and more technologically available, we're able to take the production of energy into our own hands in our own communities and produce the energy that we consume in our own homes and businesses and communities. So that is a really threatening change for the status quo of our national energy system, the way our entire grid has been constructed, and the way our utilities often have very powerful influences over our policymakers' decisions and the way our energy rates are constructed, how we pay for the energy we receive from our utility companies. These are very powerful political actors, and the rise of distributed renewable energy is often seen as an existential threat to the status quo and the way things have been done for a long time. So there's a lot of opportunities for change, but as with any large systemic change, there are also pretty powerful forces that don't necessarily want to see that change take place. So it's an interesting moment and a real time of transition for our nation and our state. And there are opportunities to absolutely increase the equity and the accessibility and the justice of our energy system with the rise of renewable energy in this country. I'll stop there and see if anyone else wants to add to that.
Yeah, thanks so much, Autumn. It's interesting to consider the geography of our energy systems and how that presents a kind of, as you say, an existential threat or need for a reconfiguration of our geographies. And it's interesting to think of Thompson's work in pursuit of and identifying those different kinds of geographies from a different vantage point, and also Adrian's work in considering geographies at even other scales of industrial development. Adrian, from your experience in working in energy acquisition and development, renewable energy, solar, I'm curious, what are the conversations around social justice and environmental justice look like in your circles and work you're doing?
Yeah, I mean, there's so much to unpack on what Autumn said. Sorry, this is what I do every day for hours a day. So I love being in the energy space. So in the environmental justice realm, you know, in renewables, look, candidly, again, I'm a white dude at a tech company, so take everything I say with a grain of salt. I definitely come from a place of privilege. The environmental justice has not been something that renewables had ever really looked at before. It's a lot of polo shirts, a lot of white dudes, and you know, it's a lot of people who have moved over from either land development, private equity, or banking into the space. So I think there's a lot of opportunity to create more diversity. Thinking about environmental justice, there's probably 3 or 4 areas that we sort of bucket things into. There's the educational piece. How do you train a workforce? And how do you think about the workforce being developed? And then how do you transition them out of, if it's coal mining or other heavy industry, how do you transition them into that work? Oh, wow. Hopefully that's not frozen for everyone else. My face had frozen. We then think about the education piece. That obviously happens when you're training the workforce, but the education piece happens when children are younger, you know, starting at younger community development, gardens, educational programs, solar for schools, things like that. Then you have the training bucket that's training workforce. And then we think about the pieces that Autumn was talking about. How do you bring more renewables to folks in the community? We have what's called the Power Force, which will be launching their website in a paper in a little bit. It's a grouping of NAACP, Emerald Cities, a number of folks who have helped Microsoft create our environmental justice framework and how we think about renewables. And it gives us principles for trying to address different projects. The way we think about it from a community engagement standpoint is Microsoft brings a data center, right? So $1 billion of investment. We consume a ton of electricity, right? 10,000 households worth of electricity in a fell swoop just to power part of a data center. So our electricity consumption is huge, which gives us a ton of leverage with utilities because they have declining supply and we bring supply to them. I'm sorry, they have declining load and we bring the load to them. We then tell them what supply we want. In terms of the community piece, what's happened in the past with redlining and other things that we've seen is that companies come in and tell the community, we're going to do these benefits for you and you want them. Community pool, you definitely want it. It's great, cool. That's not what we should be doing. We act as a pocketbook. So in a lot of work that we're doing, we have what I created an environmental justice PPA where basically a certain portion of the revenues from the PPA. And so, sorry, let me back up. The way I contract renewable energy is I use a contract called a power purchase agreement. There is a solar facility or a wind facility that is not built yet. That company comes to me and says, hey, I've got a solar facility in West Virginia. And I say, cool, I want to buy all the electricity and renewable energy credits from that solar facility. We then sign a 15 or a 20-year contract called a power purchase agreement. I pay a fixed price for all of the electricity that comes off of that project. In addition to that, in the environmental justice PPA, a portion of the payment I make, so 10% or so, goes into a 501c3 or another type of community funding activity. That pool of cash, which we have 2 of these projects with Volt Energy and Soul Systems, they will generate over 10 to 20 years of $50 to $150 million of community investment type dollars. Those funds then get distributed into the community to do energy access initiatives. And the community comes to us and tells us what they want to do. So we're not telling them what to do. We're saying it's energy access. You want to do solar on schools, you want to do backup for hospitals, you want to do a community garden, or you want to do an education or training. That's up to you within the guidelines, and you go for it. I'm going to have to switch to my phone here just in a moment because my computer's running low. I'm in the middle of packing up my house and apparently my computer charger died. So, but there's so many different spaces that we can engage in this. And just actually, I think the most critical piece is having an open dialogue. I got so lucky at Microsoft when I came over 2 years ago. I got hired as part of the carbon neutral announcement where we said we're going to be 100% renewable energy covered by 2025. And by 2030, all of Microsoft operations will be carbon neutral. Very candidly, they needed me to get the program off the ground, which was really lucky because then I got to do all these cool environmental justice things where I was like, hey, I've had this program in my head for a while and Google didn't let me get it off the ground. AWS didn't let me get it off the ground. I want to do this. And they said, great. And so we've started funding a bunch of environmental justice initiatives through our power purchase agreements. We'll get to work with the Power Force. And it's expanding beyond that into water and waste and a whole host of things that it's really exciting because quite frankly, you need companies that have a ton of cash to dive into this and spend that cash, right? Because it's really hard to do what Autumn's doing and find the funds to build solar on homes and things like that, because right now it's expensive with the solar tariffs that are in play, with supply constraints, with inflation. We were seeing solar come down the cost curve significantly, and now it's going back up the cost curve. So where solar used to be less expensive than gas generation, right now they're about tied. Although gas pricing has gone up too because of the Ukraine, so we're balanced out. But there's so many realms, so many ways we can engage. But I think for companies like myself, Microsoft, Google, the way to do it is to put our funds to work and to work with the communities where we're siting data centers. And I'm going to switch over to my phone.
Yeah. Thank you so much, Adrian, for sharing that, and also sharing the vulnerabilities that someone who works at Microsoft in solar and renewable energy also has trouble keeping their batteries charged on their computers.
Yeah, I know. I'm a hot mess. I've been that way. I'm really good at energy. I've been a hot mess since college.
I know. It's all good. Thank you so much, Adrian, for those insights as well, and also for making that link with Autumn and thinking about differently positioned companies, differently positioned communities, differently positioned initiatives. Thompson has been working for, as he said, 1.5 years doing site acquisition, and I'm curious from his vantage point, what does the conversation around social justice, environmental justice look like, coming in, and I know Thompson's done a tremendous amount of work on food justice, environmental justice issues as a graduate student, as an undergraduate student, and doing mapping. So curious how some of those questions also translate into the work that you're doing, Thompson.
Sure, thanks. I mean, I feel like Autumn and Adrian did a really good job kind of introducing some of the points I would talk about. Just to give you an example, we're on the other side of the PPAs that Adrian was introducing. So a company like the one that I work for would develop that project, and then companies like Amazon, Facebook, Google, Microsoft would then enter into those agreements, and they do often have these charitable outreach kind of built in, which is really cool to see. In terms of utility scale, though, I think that specifically with environmental justice, social justice, and even in Appalachia, obviously we have this long history with extractive industries, and solar, renewables, they're still an industry. They're coming in, there's a resource that they want. And I would just hope that these communities have learned from these histories and kind of know their worth and know what resources they have and how to protect them. And there's nothing wrong with, selling these resources to build up your local economy, but knowing your value and knowing that you do have kind of an argument to make for how you're going to lease out these resources. So I think that there's a lot of, like Autumn said, opportunity for areas that have these histories and energy production to be leaders and to kind of reshape what these exchanges and transactions look like going forward. And hopefully that they are more equitable going forward, and not just a company coming in, taking resources, destroying the natural environment, and then leaving. Obviously, we have some really good environmental impacts that just in terms of mitigating climate change with renewables, but in terms of the economic justice aspect of it, I just think that we're in a much stronger position in terms of negotiating how we enter into these agreements. So that's what I think kind of renewables have to do with social environmental justice right now.
Could I just piggyback off of that briefly as well? I would just like to point out that in areas of the country like Central Appalachia, where there is, an environmental legacy of the impacts of the coal industry, there's a lot of interest in the federal level for developing solar on former mine lands and degraded lands and brownfields. So that's a real opportunity to redevelop some of these degraded lands that are otherwise really difficult to find useful things to do with them now, and keep using them for energy production and use them for renewable energy production once they are reclaimed after the coal industry has moved on. And on the topic of PPAs, I'll just, kind of close that loop and say, this is a really important ownership structure for third-party ownership and investment of solar. And this is a policy that is not available in all states or areas. And I worked for 3 years with Solar United Neighbors to lobby for enabling legislation for PPAs in West Virginia. And it was a really difficult slog, because our existing electricity utilities did not want that type of competition in terms of private businesses like Thompson's being able to build out energy infrastructure on a large scale and sell that solar power to corporate off-takers like Microsoft. That threatens the monopoly that our utility companies have over our electricity industry production and consumption in the state of West Virginia. And so even, a small change in state code to enable these types of solar PPAs can be a difficult policy to get enacted, depending on how the utility laws are structured in particular states. And so the benefits of these types of corporate energy developments get cited in places where there are more favorable policies and markets for this type of energy infrastructure development. And so it's not a level playing field across state lines.
Yeah.
At least from a corporate perspective, that's actually, we go where our data centers are. So I'm in PJM, so that the market that West Virginia is part of, the electricity market. So really what's really exciting about my job these days is I get to work with and this is going to sound funny, but let me finish. I get to work with companies like Duke and Southern Company and Dominion. When I was a developer, they were not awesome. They would never return my calls. They wouldn't help. They wouldn't do anything. These days, when the next large industry, which is data centers, show up, when it's Google or Amazon or any of those folks, including us, we show up and we say, look, we're going to site a data center here. You want the 500 megawatts of load, and we want renewables, and we want community benefits. These companies like Southern Company and others that never return my calls, now return our calls and are putting things in place. Are the programs amazing? No, right? They have a long way to go, but they're a start. So we are seeing that sort of hegemony, like that monopoly utility is having to change their business model, right? More markets across the United States are becoming liberalized. That means more companies can get in there and sell electricity from other sources. So the big utilities, yeah, they may own the poles and wires, but they don't own the markets. And so as more markets open up across the US, there's just more opportunity for change. And so we're seeing a lot of that. And the utilities, it took them 5 years to get here, maybe 10 years to get here, but they're starting to see, oh no, we actually have to think about doing more of this stuff. I'm not positing it's a good idea for them to do it or what have you. I think change is through a bunch of other actors, but there is a big shift right now. And for better or worse, tech companies really want to lead the charge and do a bunch of this work. And we have to site data centers pretty much everywhere you can imagine. Because like right now, we're loading a data center, right? We're consuming electricity because of this call. And so every time you use your phone, your computer, anything that has cloud access or Wi-Fi or things like that, you're loading a data center server. So they're going to be large electricity consumers everywhere. So it really gives us a good amount of weight to move things around. So it puts a lot of like onus on the tech companies to not just do this for ourselves, but to try to make sure we're decarbonizing the grid for everyone, and not just decarbonizing like from an energy perspective, but thinking about redlining in previous ways infrastructure was cited and so forth, and changing that for the future, right? There's a lot of opportunity for that. And not just here in the US and not just in West Virginia, but globally. The problems are different in each of the markets and the things we have to solve, but there's a lot of opportunity.
Thanks so much. This is such a rich conversation, and it almost opens the door to the next question, which asks us to think about future research. So just as an observation, in a sense, one could say that our presence on this call suggests that the transition is underway. It's well underway, and it's not really a question of whether there is an energy transition or how we're going to transition, but rather the transition's happening. It's been happening. The fact that you all are working in this field suggests it's happening from a labor standpoint. The fact that we're seeing and witnessing it in our landscapes as we drive and we see renewables, and we're seeing them on a large scale. And of course, it's happening because we are on Zoom right now, and data centers require energy and those things. So we're well into the transition, and I don't know that we're all clear on that sometimes. So maybe one of the questions I have is, what kinds of research now is presently, do you feel like valuable research to be exploring if we want to bring about a more just transition, and we want to ensure a just transition going forward in the future? So not just research on, I know Thompson is conducting research all the time on where to site and where effective siting would be. I know Autumn is conducting research on policy across the country to figure out what the best sort of structure might be, regulatory structure for this. And I know Adrian is conducting research in various ways as well to identify not only siting of centers, but maybe effective models for, for new PPA agreements. So there's research that's happening all the time. And from your various vantage points, and I want to start with Thompson, what are some research questions or areas of research that a university like WVU, our students need to be thinking about conducting, our faculty need to be thinking about conducting, and our university administration needs to imagine hiring future staff to be conducting research in these areas for the future. So Thompson, can you share a little bit from your vantage point?
Sure. And I think you kind of touched on it. There's still some holdouts probably on the viability of the transition about production, solar arrays, when, like, can we actually, 100% move away from fossil fuels? And if we can, when does that happen? I have faith that the engineers are going to eventually solve that problem because there's a lot of money to be made, quite frankly. But where I don't see a lot of research yet, but I would like to see some questions kind of brought up, is more on the labor side of things. At least anecdotally, and I did a little bit of research, it seems like there are a lot of higher paying jobs in renewables right now, especially for my generation. Certainly not a field that I saw myself getting into. There's a lot of overlap with the tech industry, which tends to be a little bit more diverse, is slowly starting to have more women in leadership. So I am interested in that, especially for West Virginia, when we're talking about how do we transition, what do we replace all these coal jobs, all these oil and gas jobs with? What is the training needed for that? So just what does the labor market look like at this point in time? What does it look like for the next 10 to 20 years? And what programs can we develop to help push people into those industries, and also make sure that they're more equitable and just, and that other demographics have access to these industries, so that it's not just the same kind of repeating process that we saw over the past 100 years. And that also gets into the ownership structure of these industries and these companies. Adrian was talking about Duke Energy, Dominion, Shell. All of these companies are getting into renewables now. They're acquiring a company such as the one that I work for the second that they hit a certain price point in the market. And it's pretty hard to not get acquired at that point in time, because you want to continue to have a livelihood for your employees, and you may have a vision around economic and social justice and diversity that's internal, but that can be compromised when you're playing with the big boys again and the good old boys club. So I think I'm really interested in the labor side of things, and just kind of like the economic policy around who is actually funding this energy transition.
Thank you so much, Thompson. I think you provide us with some key starting points that obviously there's research that's moving in this direction, but not necessarily always a starting point per se in our thinking. So I really appreciate that. Autumn, could you share some thoughts about how we might think about research going forward, areas that require our attention?
Yeah, and I think Thompson had some really good points to make, and I agree with all of them. In addition to, the ongoing, really fast pace of technological innovation and development in this field, which is going to need to continue in terms of lowering costs and finding, new, more accessible and more sustainable materials out of which to create these products that we're all using in terms of solar and storage now. That's becoming more and more critical piece of this puzzle and this full renewable energy transition. So technology, research, and innovation is definitely, something that must continue and will continue at a really fast pace. And likewise, as Thompson said, really thinking hard about and identifying where the barriers are in terms of market development and what is holding back this transition in specific, places. And I'll use the example of the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund as a result of that type of research. So our team conducted a regional market analysis to understand what were the main policy and economic barriers that were holding back solar development in the central Appalachian coal fields and coal impacted communities, and created a set of recommendations for tools that our program can use to overcome some of those challenges, be they policy barriers or economic challenges in our region due to due to the legacy of the coal industry. So doing that type of market research is really critical to be able to move forward with solutions that actually are impactful and make sense in the local communities where we're trying to do this work.
Thank you so much, Autumn. I feel like we have like a growing research program that's emerging here, and years of work to commit to exploring these themes and answering these questions. And clearly there are colleagues here at WVU who are doing that work. So it'll be exciting to continue to invite them into that conversation and that growing conversation. Adrian, from your vantage point, what are some areas of research that we need to take seriously?
Yeah.
I mean, you were talking about 2030 and the challenges of meeting a sort of carbon neutral, and certainly setting those kinds of goals force those kind of goals force a certain set of actions to try to meet them at minimum. And so, yeah, just generally speaking, what from your vantage point, do we have to be thinking about?
So again, I am good at a lot of things a little bit, but not an expert in anything. So again, not an expert in West Virginia. But from our perspective, or at least from my perspective, I think both Autumn and Thompson were right. Like education, local community development. I think there's, at least from my perspective, I think there's a lack of transparency about what it takes to build energy projects. Like these are infrastructure projects. I think there's a lack of transparency about just the clean energy transition. It gets labeled as liberal and scary and goofy, things like that. It's not. I mean, it's a heavy industry just like anything else. And I think that education and sort of reaching out to communities and understanding what communities want or think about these developments, and then overlaying that with what energy developments actually need is helpful, because I feel like when we're looking at projects or talking to communities, there's just a significant gap between our knowledge and their knowledge of what the energy space is. And I think it does everyone a disservice to talk about the clean energy transition if we haven't educated folks about it. So I think in each of the different markets, the pieces that people don't know are different. And so getting out there and canvassing neighborhoods and communities and so forth, and just having a conversation, understand if they want renewable energy. And if they don't, why don't they want it? And understand their feelings about other energy resources and other developments. And so, because I think that would help develop programs in each market that can identify the needs and address the needs of those communities. Especially in communities that are agricultural based, renewables take up a bunch of space, right? Yes, you can sort of have a feedstock under them with goats and things like that. And yes, you can have wind turbines in a field and graze them, but it's still a big piece of steel. It's still like glass and so forth in a field. So I think just acknowledging that we're still a heavy industry and making sure that we're addressing community concerns that way is really important. So I would start just canvassing communities and understanding what they need. I mean, we have to do the same thing with data centers. We have done a terrible job, all data center companies in the past, and just sort of go and site infrastructure. And I think there's a lot more of a conscientious effort now to talk to the communities first.
Thanks so much, Adrian. I feel like you're making a critical point for all of us, which is that community-based research is important in any process.
You taught me that.
Yeah.
You taught me that, Brad.
Yeah, no, I don't know about that. I'm not sure.
Everything.
Well, I wanted to ask Dr. Ferrata to offer some perspectives, perhaps from his vantage point as well, or if there's some observations from what's been shared. Dr. Ferrata is a legal, he's a lawyer as well as a policy analyst and a theorist. So I'm curious from your vantage point, were there some things in the conversation today that are bubbling to the surface for you that you want to follow up with, or things that have aligned with areas of research that you're interested as well?
Yes, absolutely. Thank you for the question. So thanks for the speakers, because all you shared today is extremely important for the work we are doing. And my advantage perspective is trying really to see how everything we are discussing can be then operational in terms of research, in terms of creating a kind of interaction between the work we are doing in terms of community development that we are doing and research, but also from the other side, having involvement from a private sector and companies that they are active as the ones we are talking with. So everything that Adrian, Houghton, and Thompson are discussing are extremely important, from not only from the Appalachian perspective, not only from the US perspective, but also from a global perspective. So that's my a comment, but also becomes a question for the speakers. If you see, for example, in your work, like the work at the Center for Resilient Communities is doing, very much involved in trying to bring at West Virginia and Appalachian level the UN Sustainable Development Goals. Are your organization referring to these targets and these references in the work you are doing? Because that's also important to see if you do refers to targets or criteria that come from outside, so from the US perspective and from global perspective, like the UN Sustainable Development Goals. That's one example, one point and one comment and one question for you. And then from the other side, we'd be also interested in hearing whether, for example, from the perspective of Adrian, but also the other speakers, you are involved somehow in a cooperative initiative with other branches of Microsoft or headquarters or other companies even in other countries. And I think particularly Europe, because of course the context of the Chinese context is extremely different than the one we know here or we know in Europe. So do you see there an opportunity for this kind of conversation? And then last, another point, I would have many more questions, whether all of you in a way or in another have made reference to legal perspective and policy issues, even in the responses in writing. I saw from Houghton reference about that. Are you somehow involved in promoting your vision with local legislator or even federal legislator to try to bring attention to some of the roadblocks that you are experiencing, or maybe even communities are experiencing? And so are you promoting your ideas and your perspective in a let's say, legal policy framework in a way that you can have an impact in the conversation? I would be happy to hear about that, and that can be certainly an area of collaboration we can bring on. So from one side, the community development, certainly what Houghton, Thompson, and also you, Adrian, have said are very much relevant from this side, but also what each one of you has said in a way or in another can be brought then in the policy dialogue and also in the legal processes, and how we can try to bring a change there as well. So I would like to hear that. And thanks a lot for all your contributions.
You bet. That was a lot of questions. So I think it was 3 questions with lots of different parts. So I'm going to start at the last one first and work my way back. Policy roadblocks and so forth. I drive a bulldozer through roadblocks typically, so I am not the delicate right person to be having policy or rate maker discussions. But I do spend a lot of time building policy briefs and coming up with initiatives. And then we have an amazing policy team and a set of experts who work with the government, federal government, local governments, community councils that go and push our agenda, and specifically carbon neutrality and environmental justice. So yeah, one of the really cool things about working for a tech company and working for the man is that if you work for the right company, they are really trying to push some cool social initiatives, some really interesting transparency work for everyone. And so it's really inspiring. Yeah, we have a bunch of foibles and flaws and so forth, but from a policy perspective, to answer your question, yeah, we're out pushing every day in every market where we operate, and we're building our policy team every day. We're getting bigger and bigger. The global piece, yes, we're in every market. We function under the greenhouse gas protocols. We're science-based targets. We actually don't think that carbon accounting is properly doing its assessment right now. We think the CDP and others sort of make it too average and too easy. So we're doing a lot of locational marginal impact analysis for carbon emissions and things like that, which has real impacts for communities, because you can start looking at where place gas plants and say, look, the locational marginal carbon impact here is really significant. So you can start making policy decisions based on that. We're a ways out. There's really hard to get grid level transparency for carbon data in every market, but we're working on it. And so that's really exciting. And that's a global initiative. And then apologize. What was your first? I'm trying to remember your first question. It was more of a, yeah, go.
Partnership also with other
yes.
companies.
Yeah, so so for Microsoft, again, I work for a tech company, so I'm really spoiled. So we get to do partnerships with all sorts of people. People want to do partnerships with us all the time, whether it's Southern Company or it's AES or Shell, or it's the NRDC or the NAACP or local communities. Or what's been really inspiring lately is I get to work with a gentleman, Gilbert Campbell, who runs Volt Energy, and we get to partner with him. He's one of the first African Americans to own a solar company in the United States, and helping him, just giving him an opportunity to build his business. And what's been really amazing is we were like, cool, we'll sign some agreements with you. And he went out and started these 501c3s for community investment. He's working with HBCUs. Like, there's just so many cool things that can happen with collaboration at the level we get to do it. And so hopefully we get to continue doing that across the board. So it's a yes to all your questions. We get to do all of that stuff, and we're engaged in all of it. Can we do a better job? Probably, but yeah, so far we're doing it.
Well, we're going to hold you accountable to that, Adrian. Keep doing a better
You
job.
always do.
Autumn, how about from your vantage point? Do you want to take on all three, or is there a specific response to any one of those three areas?
Well, I'll say in terms of, collaboration, yes, always, I think, is the easy answer. And like, it's critical to have those collaborations and partnerships, and to build out those types of collaborative efforts between, the public and private sector and research institutions and nonprofits, to build as many bridges as possible. I feel like maybe I lost the train on the other two questions. If you wouldn't mind reminding me where those were coming from.
Yeah, I was.
I think
And you're muted.
Oh, sorry, I'm on mute.
Oh, sorry.
That was my fault. I'm so sorry.
No problem. I was saying I was also referring to external targets like the UN Sustainable Development Goals, and then other global initiative, or if you are involved, and that was the second question of between the second and the third, in legal and policy activism to try to bring a change, like in your response to one of the participants, it seems very much so. So I wanted to hear more about that. Thank you so much.
Yeah, I mean, policy advocacy is such a critical piece of moving our energy transition forward in like as timely a manner as possible, because that's where really like the bottlenecks tend to happen, or one of the places where bottlenecks tend to happen. one of our goals, and again, I'll refer to the Appalachian Solar Finance Fund, the program I'm currently managing for Appalachian Voices. One of the goals of this program is not only to catalyze new solar projects in communities where they're sometimes difficult to pencil out financially for policy and economic reasons, but it's to use those challenges as examples of why policy change is so important. So we're trying to shine a light on those issues through these real world examples. And I will cite the solar investment tax credit as a really significant and simple example of this is a federal policy. It's an income tax credit. And so it's a great financial boost for solar projects, for private companies and individuals, anybody who pays income tax. However, if you're a tax exempt entity, like institution or a nonprofit, you're currently not able to access the value of that tax credit, especially in markets where third-party ownership through PPA or lease structures are not enabled. So it makes solar, significantly more expensive for entities and institutions that can't access that tax credit. And, that's a simple federal policy change that could take place at any point that could make solar more accessible and more affordable for a wider range of institutions. And there are many such small tweaks that could be made to existing policies and new enabling policies that could be enacted that can really spur more solar development on the local, state, and federal level.
Autumn, in the interim, we can help you with the workaround.
Yes.
The fun part of my job is I get to break the rules all the time and try to figure workarounds. So
this is why a conversation is good rather than just straight up presentations, because I'll place you, and we have these breakout rooms, right? That's what Zoom's all about. So we'll put you in a breakout room, which will be some other place within the solar farm that's been developed where you can have a conversation about breaking rules and things. I love it, but I'm in jest, of course. Thompson has been with his company and in his work for a year and a half, so he's not allowed to break the rules yet, I presume, and has to fly under such a radar. I'm curious, Thompson, from your vantage point. So again, to reiterate, I think Dr. Farah's observations, there's sort of a discussion around community-based research and community involvement in research, and thinking about partnerships also between companies and researchers and communities. There's also the question of global targets, which in some regards, companies like, I'm sure, Urban Grid or companies like Microsoft are all reacting to in some way, shape, or form, and the UN Sustainable Development Goals being one of them, but there are other targets too. And then lastly, of course, the question of the nitty-gritty of legislative and policy change. How does that kind of come about? I'm curious if any of those three areas were something that you wanted to speak to or consider or reflect on.
Yeah, absolutely. I mean, global targets, like the ones that you guys mentioned, are just frankly good for business. So we're well aware of them. We're involved with politics and policy at every level, from federal down to municipalities and county. And then to bring it back to the kind of economic intersection between policy and economic development, we have to operate within the regulations of various states and counties and markets. We always try and stress the economic opportunity that specific policies allow or kind of prevent us from coming into. A lot of times we may get a landowner who's familiar with utility scale solar, knows that he has suitable land, but we can't go in there because of a specific county or jurisdiction is very hostile. And a lot of times it's based on some really bad science. A lot of times it's just anti-industry. And so we certainly weigh in at those opportunities and those kind of instances. I'm not super familiar with them just based on my limited experience. Unfortunately, Amanda Marble couldn't join us today, but I think she's going to be very instrumental within our own company on that side of things, just based on her experience working at WVU and where her interests align. So unfortunately, I can't speak for her, but maybe she can join us next time. And yeah, to take it back up to the state level, I don't, Autumn's in Virginia right now, in Richmond, which is actually where my company is headquartered. And the governor of Virginia just signed, I think it was an executive order that reclassified solar farms as impervious surfaces on the same vein as like a parking lot. So how that affects how solar farms are built and the policies around that are, you have to have setbacks for stormwater runoff that are equal to a parking lot for a solar farm. Well, a solar farm's not a parking lot. You can have pollinator plants underneath solar farms. You can have even some like small livestock, like kind of commingling within solar farms. And so they're trying to brand this as like an environmental concern. But if you look at who's pushing these policies, they're not concerned with other environmental issues. What they're really trying to do is push back against renewable energy. So that's certainly something that's on our radar and kind of interrupts our day-to-day business. And so whenever that happens, we're going to try and push back.
Yeah, that's a really good point, that like seemingly simple, jurisdictional codes from the local level through the state level up to the federal level can have really far-reaching impacts on the way that this development takes place and how it's able to take place. So always, it's always worth, asking those questions, like following the money, like who made this rule, like where did it come from, like what are the impacts really going to be. And Virginia is a great example of a state that, with one piece of legislation, the Virginia Clean Economies Act that was passed in early 2020, it's completely catalyzed the state solar market in several ways and created an SREC market, which is driving a lot of new development in Virginia. So yeah, state policy can just be a make or break in terms of not only whether and how fast a solar market develops, but like how it develops and how it gets shaped and like what it ends up looking like and who benefits.
This has just been so enriching, and my mind's spinning around a range of different things, but I'm sitting in a building called Brooks Hall in Eberly College of Arts and Sciences at WVU, and I'm surrounded by colleagues, and we're all doing various kinds of research, and we're teaching our classes, and we're engaging with workforces that are learning, to engage and become part of this. We're thinking about policy change, but we live and work in a state institution whose intention is to provide education, research, and service to the state of West Virginia. That's the focus of what we're doing. And currently in the Department of Geology and Geography, which is going through its own transition, very much influenced and reflects, sort of all of the transitions that are taking place to become a school of earth science and sustainability. I'm curious from your vantage point, Thompson and Autumn as graduates of the program, Adrian as someone who's thinking about what's the future workforce look like, I'd like to end on a kind of, in a sense, a workforce question. There are going to be a lot of young people who are reflecting on this conversation and maybe joining it with us this summer and into the fall and next year, who look at the word sustainability and think about a future career contributing to a more sustainable future from the earth sciences standpoint, and also, from the standpoint of maybe policy and systems change. And so I'm curious, maybe kind of what advice you might be able to give the faculty and the university administration as we're moving into this development of the school. What might we need to be thinking about, or what would be your advice, as we develop a workforce to train that workforce, or to inform that the citizens, the future citizens, the generation that's coming up now, what do we need to be thinking about teaching about, and what do we need to think about, yeah, helping to prepare that generation. I certainly need to retool. I think that Paulo is in this space, so he's certainly knowledgeable. But there are faculty on the call. There are faculty who are alums from WVU who are on this call, who are teaching at other universities. You know, the university needs to change too. And so what would be your advice for us going forward as to things we can be thinking about doing, you know, as faculty in how we're providing an education to our students? We reach hundreds and hundreds of students a year, thousands and thousands of students a year. So yeah, how can we be more effective and engaged in trying to address some of the things that were raised today?
Yeah, I'm not sure. I definitely don't have an answer prepared for that one. You know, I can speak anecdotally again that, you know, we must have been doing something right because we've hired a few WVU geography grads, and I think that they've been generally pleased with kind of our background, our multidisciplinary approach to earth sciences and GIS and everything else that we kind of learned along the way. So certainly don't abandon that or throw everything out. I also, you know, recall plenty of industry people from oil and gas coming through Brooks Hall and giving presentations pretty regularly. So I would, you know, encourage more events like this and even more renewable people coming in and speaking to that. Yeah, I'd have to think, I think longer about what else I'd like to see with this like unique opportunity that you guys have with the transition to a new department.
I can add that I think, you know, GIS and remote sensing and that type of site analysis is a really important piece of, you know, the solar industry and solar development. So y'all are well positioned to be, you know, training up new careers within that part of the industry. I teach a class on solar PV technology and policy in the energy management majors in the Davis School. And those are folks who, you know, have traditionally been coming through an energy management program that's very focused on traditional fossil fuel based energy sources. And it's been students there who have been asking for more curriculum options about solar and renewable energy. So I think the students recognize this as a need and something that they want to learn about. And so developing more coursework, you know, that focuses around solar and other renewable energy sources, I think will be increasingly important to be educating you know, students and workers of the 21st century. And then, you know, tying that in with this broad, you know, multidisciplinary approach where students understand that these systems, that this technology is being deployed within complex systems and complex, you know, political systems and technological systems. So we have to understand like how all of these different structures, social structures and economic structures and political structures interplay to create the very complicated energy system that we, you know, deal with every day in this country. So I think the geography department is actually really well positioned to play an important role in developing a new generation of people who are like well educated in issues of sustainability and who can come at these problems from a lot of different perspectives. And there's going to be room and need for everybody within this industry. It's growing massively and it's going to employ a lot of people in the coming decades.
So obviously I didn't go to VU. I went to Bates, but from my perspective, you know, we're thinking about a geography department. I think critical analysis is really important, and making sure that students have the ability to solve complex problems. And I'm not saying you have to give them a problem set and make them go solve calculus or something like that, although that's helpful. I think it's really critical, at least from my perspective, when I hire folks and I have a team of 15 or 20, it's really important that they are able to problem solve and to be collaborative and to think. Like, one of the issues that, I'll be very candid, one of the issues we have with folks who get a sustainability degree is they have a sustainability degree. It is not helpful in business. It is not helpful in energy generation. It is not helpful in solar. It's great to have the policy knowledge and it's great to understand carbon accounting. But what's critical for all of this is to think about renewables just like you would think about any other industry, right? It is a business industry, right? So you need to have good fundamentals in business, good fundamentals in problem solving, and then to be creative. And having the sustainability layer on top of that is awesome. But like, half of our job is convincing folks to do what we want them to do and to overcome all of these problems. And the whole carbon issue and trying to become carbon neutral as a society holistically, right, from corporations down to communities, is a really complex problem, right? It is so complex on a daily basis. It makes my head explode just trying to think about what we have to do on a little bit, like not even our whole 2030 goal, just on a daily basis. So I really can't stress enough having people who are a little bit of a glutton for punishment and will keep challenging themselves and keep going, because it's really hard. And you need to have the fundamentals like in math and science and quite frankly, legal, being able to write well and articulate well and having good grammar, at least when you're articulating in a paper, being able to make. This world that I live in is very different than the academic world. You don't have 30 pages to write a paper. You have 1 page. You have to make your point in 1 page. So, and that's how policy briefs work with the federal government, with any local governments. You literally have a page to make your point and to get people to pay attention. And this goes back to the question about, are we engaged in policy and do we have a policy team? Brad Smith, who's the head of Microsoft, goes out and does all of our policy work, right? He's a president, he's well respected, he's written a number of books. To get him to pay attention to you, you write him a paragraph, and he is going to go and deliver a message to the federal government on sustainability from a paragraph. He takes that paragraph and makes it 3 pages with the way he speaks and the way he articulates and does his research. But it's really critical to be able to boil your complex problem down into very simple explanation, and to go forward. I'm not great at that, I will be very honest, but it is absolutely critical for this space. So I think, creating that enthusiasm in your program, but also just giving the basics for business education is really critical.
Thank you so much, Adrian. I want to thank Adrian for his time. I want to thank Autumn for taking time, and Thompson for taking time, and Dr. Farah for really encouraging this conversation to take place, and for all of you who've been able to join us from afar and from right here at West Virginia University. I'll invite the panelists to stick around for just a couple more minutes. I wish I was serving lunch. I wish we were all here together having some lunch, but soon enough, we'll make sure that happens. Again, thanks Thompson, Autumn, and Adrian for joining us, and Dr. Farah for encouraging. I hope everyone has a wonderful week and a wonderful weekend. Take care, everyone.
Thank you so
Thank you,
much.
Dr. Wilson.